my marriage didn't start in silence. 25 years ago, it started with enough noise and fire to light up the whole city. I remember the day I met Sarah, the first woman I ever promised forever to. We were in our early 20s, full of that dangerous, beautiful arrogance that only young people have. We thought we were the exception to every rule. We spent our nights talking until the sun came up, planning a life that seemed limitless. We bought our first house with more hope than money, and for the first 10 years, that house was full of life. There was laughter in the kitchen, shared dreams over morning coffee, and a sense that we were a team against the world. We weren't just husband and wife, we were best friends. I remember thinking, this is it. I've made it. I've made it. But then, the years started to bleed into one another. It didn't happen with a massive explosion. There was no single moment where it all broke. Instead, it was like a slow leak in a tire. A little bit of air escaped every day, so slowly that you didn't notice until you were riding on the rims. The shared dreams turned into shared bills. The long conversations turned into functional check-ins. Did you pay the mortgage? Is the car fixed? What's for dinner? We stopped looking at each other when we spoke. We started living parallel lives in the same house. By the time I hit 47, the fire hadn't just gone out. The ashes were cold. We were two ghosts haunting the same hallways. We lived separately under one roof, sharing a past that neither of us recognized anymore. I had accepted it. I thought, well, John, this is it. This is the gray landscape of the rest of your life. You've had your run, now you just wait for the clock to run out. I felt old, not in my bones, but in my soul. I was convinced my heart had simply gone into retirement. I stopped buying new clothes. I stopped planning for the future. I was just existing. I'd spend my evenings staring at the TV, not even knowing what I was watching, just grateful that the silence was being filled by something other than my own heavy thoughts. Then came the business trip to Australia. I was 48, cynical and tired. I didn't even want to go. I remember sitting in a small cafe in Sydney, looking at the harbor, feeling like I was watching the world through a thick pane of glass. Everyone around me seemed so vibrant, so full of color, and I felt like a black and white photo in a digital world. And then I met her. Let's call her Claire. It wasn't some scandalous cinematic affair. It was an emotional connection that hit me like a lightning bolt. For 2 weeks, someone actually looked at me. Not through me, but at me. Someone laughed at my jokes, the ones my wife hadn't smiled at in 15 years. Claire asked me what I dreamed about, and I realized with a shock that I couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked me that. I couldn't remember the last time I had asked myself that. We spent hours talking about life, regret, and the strange beauty of the ocean. It was a brief window into a life I thought was gone forever. That connection in Australia didn't save my old marriage. It destroyed the illusion that I was dead. I flew back home with a terrifying realization. My heart was very much alive, and it was starving for air. I decided to start over, but at nearly 50, I was like a fish out of water. I felt like Leisure Suit Larry, awkward, outdated, and looking for connection in all the wrong places. This was the era of apps, swipes, and situationships, things I knew nothing about. I was a man from a different century trying to navigate a digital jungle. I went through a wild phase that was as hilarious as it was pathetic. I remember my first date after the separation. I wore a shirt that was probably 10 years out of style and took a woman 10 years younger than me to a place that was far too loud for a man of my age. She spent the entire night on her phone taking pictures of her drink, and I spent the entire night wondering if I'd left the stove on at home. We had zero in common, but I was so desperate to feel alive that I didn't care. At least, not at first. Then there were the adventurers. I met one woman who insisted we go rock climbing on our first date. There I was, 49 years old, hanging off a wall, praying to God my insurance was paid up, while she shouted positive affirmations from below. Then there was the woman who spent 40 minutes explaining why her cat was actually a reincarnated Victorian poet. I nodded, I smiled, and I paid the bill, all while a small voice in my head whispered, "John, what are you doing?" I had some good adventures and some truly bad ones. I sat in my car after one particularly disastrous date and thought, "John, you're an old fool. Go home and get a dog. The world has moved on without you." But something inside me, that spark from Sydney, kept saying, "Wait, the right one is out there. She's looking for you too." I was 50 when I met Elena. No games, no rock climbing, no reincarnated cats. Just two people who had been through the fire and knew exactly who they were. We met for a simple coffee, which turned into a 4-hour walk through the park. There was no performance. I didn't have to pretend to be younger or cooler or more successful. I could just be John. When you find the right person at that age, you don't waste time playing hard to get. You don't wait 3 days to call. You realize that time is the most precious thing you have left. We were honest about our baggage, our fears, and our backpacks of issues. And for the first time, the backpacks matched. A year later, at 51, I stood at the altar again. My friends thought I was having a crisis. My ex-wife thought I was being impulsive. But for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't walking through a graveyard of what-ifs. I was walking into a home. That was 6 years ago. Today, I'm 57. I look at the woman sleeping next to me and I think about that 47-year-old version of John who thought his life was over. The man who sat in the dark, convinced he was destined to be a ghost in his own house. If I could go back, I'd grab him by the shoulders and shake him. I'd tell him, don't settle for the silence. Don't believe the lie that your heart has an expiration date. Your late 40s aren't the end, they're just the messy middle before the best part begins. It's been 6 years of laughter, real partnership, and a love that feels as fresh today as it did on that first 4-hour walk. I found my life at 50. And if you're sitting there at 45, 50, or even 55, feeling like it's too late, take it from me. You aren't dead yet. The apps, the awkward dates, the fear of starting over, it's all worth it. Because the best story of your life hasn't even been written. You just have to be brave enough to pick up the pen.